Good evening, I'm Dwight Drummond. Authorities have arrested a Toronto area teen on suspicion he was planning to travel abroad to join ISIS, the same terrorist organization that the New Orleans attacker pledged allegiance to. As Carolyn Bargout reports, it follows other recent arrests in Canada tied to ISIS.
There are very few details in this case, which is under a publication ban. That's because the man was a teenager when police allege he planned to leave Canada to join ISIS. He's 18 years old now and is from Newmarket, Ontario. He isn't facing terrorism charges, but last month, RCMP applied for a terrorism peace bond, which would restrict his movements. Now, peace bonds are court orders that can be issued against people if it is believed they are likely going to commit a crime, but there's no evidence to suggest that they've already committed a crime. They come with strict conditions and could be in effect for 12 months. If the person keeps the peace, they won't face charges. This is the third case in the past 6 months that RCMP have accused someone in Ontario of having an ISIS connection. In July, a father and son, Ahmed and Mustafa El-Didi, were arrested and charged in connection with an alleged violent plot involving an axe and a machete. The elder El-Didi now faces war crimes charges after he was allegedly seen dismembering a man in a 2015 ISIS propaganda video that was recorded in Iraq. In September, the RCMP arrested Mohammed Shehzab Khan in Quebec near the U.S. border. He's a Pakistani citizen living in Mississauga, Ontario. Now, investigators allege Khan was en route to New York City to carry out a mass shooting at a Jewish center. As for the 18-year-old, he was released on a $2,000 bond and is expected to be back in court mid-January. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Toronto.
A Brampton man accused of being involved in the multinational drug ring run by a Canadian Olympic snowboarder, Ryan Redding, is asking to be released on bail pending extradition. Hardeep Rattay was arrested in mid-October in the GTA. He's accused of moving more than 600 kilograms of cocaine from Los Angeles to Canada. The two shipments allegedly happened last March and April. The federal crown is representing the FBI in this case. They say Rattay met with Redding in California and that the drugs from Colombia were brought into the U.S. through Mexico. Rattay's wife says she's willing to put up the $200,000 to get him released, saying she has 5 properties and can afford the bail. Rattay's 3 co-accused, including his nephew, are awaiting their respective bail hearings. Redding is accused of being behind multiple murders in Canada, including the 2023 killing of an Indian couple visiting their children in Caledon. He is still on the run. The FBI gave an update on the attack in New Orleans that killed 14 people early New Year's Day. They say it appears that he did not have accomplices as they first suspected. Mike Crawley now with the latest.
The FBI now believes the man who drove a truck through a crowd of people celebrating New Year's in New Orleans acted alone. Investigators say their evidence is that no one else was involved in the attack other than Shamsuddin Jabbar, the U.S.-born suspect. They say on New Year's Eve, Jabbar drove his rented Ford F-150 from Houston, where he lived, to New Orleans. It's about a 6-hour drive, and posted videos to social media along the way, including one stating that he had, quote, joined ISIS before this summer. The FBI is now trying to figure out what they call Jabbar's path to radicalization.
What I can tell you right now is that he was 100% inspired by ISIS, and so we're digging through more of the social media, more interviews, working with some of our other partners to ascertain just how to ascertain a little bit more about that connection.
Investigators have surveillance video showing Jabbar leaving 2 improvised explosive devices in the French Quarter on New Year's Eve. These were inside coolers, and the FBI says some bystanders actually looked inside those coolers, and they would like to hear from those people or from anyone who may have seen Jabbar place them. Officials in New Orleans are trying to reassure people that the city is safe. Bourbon Street, the site of the attack, was reopened to the public on Thursday. Louisiana's governor toured the street just ahead of the Sugar Bowl, the college football game that was due to happen on New Year's Day, but was postponed by 24 hours for security reasons. The authorities have also clarified the death toll, saying that 14 people were killed in the attack, plus Jabbar, who died in a shootout with police. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Washington.
Toronto police are investigating a string of shootings to start the new year, one of them taking place near the 401 and Weston Road. We spoke to people who live in the area.
This is an extremely quiet neighborhood. You usually don't hear stuff like this, but what are you going to do?
It's a little scary. This is what, the second? No, this is the third shooting in the neighborhood over the past while.
Officers responded to this house in the area of Yorkdale Crescent and Jodhpur Avenue just after 9 p.m. They say the victim suffered life-threatening injuries but somehow made their own way to hospital. Investigators are also looking into 3 other shootings happening in the east end of the city last night. Police announced 2 new arrests today in connection to a murder investigation from a year and a half ago. 2 men are now facing first-degree murder charges for the shooting death of 21-year-old Joshua Bernard Reese. Investigators believe he was an innocent victim of a gang feud. Greg Ross now with the update.
On September 24th, 2023, Joshua Bernard Reese was shot in the driveway of his home on Danzig Street. He was only 21 years old.
Joshua was just returning home from helping a family member move. He parked his car on his driveway and walked towards the front door of his house. That is when 4 suspects opened fire with handguns from across the street in a small park area.
Several shots were fired at Bernard Reese and another man who was in his car with him. The other man somehow managed to escape injury. Bernard Reese was struck several times.
Joshua was rushed to hospital where he remained for 2 weeks before passing away.
The suspects fled the scene in a stolen vehicle. Police say they arrested 2 of those suspects on Monday.
Tyler Brown, 21 years, of Toronto, and an 18-year-old man of Brampton who was a young person at the time of the incident and therefore cannot be identified under the Youth Criminal Justice Act.
Both of the other 2 suspects were arrested within months of the shooting. All 4 are now facing first-degree murder charges as well as attempted murder charges. The motive behind the shooting remains unclear.
There's no indication that he was the intended target at all, beyond the fact that the shots were fired at him, but I can see no reason why he would have been targeted as an individual himself.
Police say the suspects were affiliated with a gang, and it's possible Bernard Reese was an innocent bystander in a turf war.
A gang might try and send a message to an opposite gang by shooting an individual in their neighborhood.
Police say there is a high likelihood that this is what happened in this case. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Another blow for the federal Liberals. Toronto MP and former cabinet minister Marco Mendicino announced today he will not be seeking re-election. Mendicino posted a statement to his X account this afternoon saying he has disagreed with the federal government on foreign policy, especially when it comes to Canada's role in the Middle East. He also added that move is the right choice at the right time for him and his family. Mendicino has represented the Eglinton-Lawrence riding since 2015 and has served on Prime Minister Trudeau's cabinet twice, with stints as the Minister of Immigration and Minister for Public Safety. Thanks to the postal strike, the December 31st deadline to make your charitable donation for the 2024 tax year has been extended. You now have 2 more months to help a charity of your choice. Our CBC annual Make the Season Kind campaign to help food banks is over, and they are now tallying up those numbers. This charitable donation tax extension is a good news for a tough year for those food banks. Tyreek Reed has the story.
Well, it was clear that the community did make the season kind.
There's now over 1 million reasons why GTA food banks can expect more support. The annual Make the Season Kind campaign raised over $1 million. And although final numbers are still being tallied, the Daily Bread Food Bank says these numbers are just what food banks need as they come out of a challenging year.
What we saw in Toronto was the largest, by far, growth of food bank usage that we had ever seen in our 40-plus year history. But we also saw the community come together. And my hope is that through 2025, they advocate and we start to see a reduction in food bank usage.
The news comes as Ottawa announced an extension for claiming charitable donations on tax returns through to the end of February, after charities struggled with receiving donations during the holiday season due to the Canada Post strike, which means food banks are now hoping the kindness continues into the new year.
So having that extension, I think, will give people the opportunity to donate at the beginning of the year and make the choice for them, whatever is better for them tax-wise. The bottom line is charities called for it.
Feed Scarborough is one of the charities calling for it as demand for their services grow.
What it really means is whether we keep our lights open or closed. When the strike continued for so long, most of our folks were in tears, not knowing what we're going to do the next year. And when the last moment the decision came in that it'll be extended, it was a sigh of relief for all of us.
And while it's been a week full of relief, food banks are hoping the support continues for the rest of the year.
We are now providing about 1 million meals per week just through the Daily Bread Food Bank, let alone all the GTA food banks. And so while there is much to celebrate, there's more to do. And my hope is that this is a new year with new resolutions where we might be able to advocate even harder so that next year the lineups are far, far less long than they are right now.
Final numbers for the campaign will be released later this month. Tariq Reed, CBC News, Toronto.
Ontario will be transitioning 9 drug injection sites across the province into treatment hubs. The injection sites located within 200 meters of schools and licensed childcare centers will be transitioned into what the province calls homelessness and addiction recovery treatment hubs. These hubs will provide a variety of services from primary care and mental health support to social services and employment support. Toronto Public Health will be in charge of operating one of these hard hubs in our city. The real estate market could see some shifts in 2025. Things were very sluggish through last year, especially in the GTA's condo market, which is at an almost 30-year low for sales. But interest rate cuts and some new mortgage rules could set the stage for some change. Talia Ricci explains.
When looking at the real estate market right now, analysts say the outlook depends on the type of housing. If you're searching for a tiny box in the sky, there's no shortage of those.
Those units, we have a ton of inventory. Not a lot of people buying them because many of those fall into this sort of category where they're a little bit too small for people to live in, to want to own or occupy them, and investors aren't buying them. And I think this is one of the problems with Canada's housing crisis. This is how Canada filled our rental supply. Rather than building permanent rental housing, we built a lot of tiny condos bought by investors, which has effectively shut out families out of the downtown core.
The federal government changed the mortgage rules in 2024 to make it easier for buyers to enter the market. It expanded eligibility for 30-year amortizations to all first-time homebuyers and all purchasers of new builds, and also increased the $1 million price cap for insured mortgages to $1.5 million. That means buyers can purchase a $1.5 million home with less than 20% down.
So the market between $1 million and $1.5 million is going to be really robust for 2025. The other thing that's also going to help the market is the intention of the reducing of their interest rates going forward.
The Bank of Canada lowered its interest rate by 50 basis points to 3.25% in December, marking the 5th consecutive reduction since June. But those cuts haven't made big waves in the market.
It does take a little bit of time for the dust to settle and to people to realize, what their purchasing power is going to be. I think we're going to see at least a 5 to 10% increase in prices over the course of 2025.
I think what we typically will see is that spring market is always the indicator of what's going to be happening within the rest of the year. So I think what we're going to start to see is a little bit of pent-up demand. People are starting to, lower prices, which means buyers are starting to get a little bit excited about the marketplace and starting to look a little bit more. So I think we'll see a little bit more of that, I guess, increased activity.
Experts say the market has slowed down and 2025 could see a bit more negotiating room for buyers. We likely won't be repeating the crazy bidding wars that we saw during the pandemic anytime soon.
That frenzy was absolute craziness. And we said it when it was happening, that it was really, you would set your phone down and within 5 minutes, you would have 5, 10, 15 showings booked on one property. Those expectations can't be there anymore. The expectation has to be that the market has come back down to earth.
Some people we've seen who are worried about, not just the relationship with the U.S., just economic uncertainty generally in Canada. If they're worried about job stability as they move into 2025, people are going to sit on the sidelines and wait.
Now, there is some good news for renters, which make up about half of Toronto. Average rental prices hit a 28-month low in November, mostly because there's a lot of inventory right now. And that trend is expected to continue into 2025. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
A host of new legislative changes came into effect when Ontario entered 2025. Among them, tougher penalties for those who are convicted of driving under the influence. Lane Harrison explains what is new.
You're just conducting a ride spot check. Any drugs or alcohol today? Ontario has brought in new penalties to stop people from drinking and driving. As of January 1st, anyone who's convicted of impaired driving causing death receives a lifetime license suspension.
So clearly there's a segment of the population who hasn't got that message. And ideally we'd like to think that public awareness prevents everybody, that everybody's going to make the right choice, but sadly people aren't.
The most up-to-date available public data shows the OPP gradually laid more impaired driving charges each year between 2021 and 2023. First-time offenders who fall in the warning range of a blood alcohol level between 0.05 and 0.079 will now see longer license suspensions from 3 days to 7 days, and for a second-time offense from 7 days to 14.
We see a lot of clients with multiple drinking and driving charges. We get lots of phone calls about multiple. So that's what I'm saying, is that the first time that they're charged, obviously it didn't persuade them not to do it again. So that's, I think, a true sign for some individuals that it's not strict enough or the consequences aren't severe enough.
That addictions counselor says new penalties may help deter some, but not everyone.
When you're under the influence, I mean, you're not thinking clearly. So there's, they're not going to be thinking about the consequences then if they decide to go out and drink and drive anyways.
Roadside suspensions, license suspensions.
The transportation minister was asked how effective he thinks the new regulations will be when they were announced.
It's really about, from the province's side, doing anything and everything we can to ensure that we disincentivize anyone for making such a foolish choice, which is to get behind the wheel while being impaired.
The changes were voted into law in November, but are now in force in the Highway Traffic Act. Elaine Harrison, CBC News, Toronto.
Lower childcare fees take effect this month as Ontario works towards the national $10 a day program. While parents will be saving money, some childcare centre operators say the funding formula has led to program cuts. Brittany Billette explains.
Shall we keep going? New daycare fee caps in Ontario means big savings for some families.
$22 a day for infant care is absolutely, it's a gift. It's a gift, really is.
Lindsay McKay and her family will be saving $500 every month.
We'll be able to put that money in savings. We hope to buy a home someday, or even rent a place that has a bit more space, or maybe even extend our family by having another child. I would love that.
Daycare fees are now capped at $22 a day, but the province says the average parent will pay $19. The reduction applies to parents with kids under 6 enrolled at a licensed daycare. It's another step towards Ontario implementing $10 a day daycare, part of the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare System, otherwise known as CWELC, a federal-provincial agreement established in 2021. And this month, as part of the program, the province also introduced a new funding formula for daycare operators that's based on location, space numbers, and age groups. But many say that system doesn't work for them.
I've heard, wow, this is a lot more paperwork. Financially, yeah, maybe I can make it work, but holy smokes, is it ever intrusive? A lot of them feel like the government is running the center and they're just along for the ride. And so they're losing their ability to maintain quality and do all of the things that made care at that center special for the families they serve.
The province has previously said that it made these policy changes based on extensive consultations with partners in childcare delivery. Some advocates say overall, the province is moving in the right direction.
The progress that we've made in 4 years, less than 4 years, is really phenomenal. It's tremendous. But building a childcare system that makes affordable childcare available to all who want it is a long-term proposition.
The Ontario government is pledging to bring in $10 a day daycare by March 2026, a goal that was pushed back from its original promise of September 2025. Brittany Billette, CBC News, Toronto.
Look at us, together again, just like the old days. Okay, Colin. Earlier in the show...
Oh, he's real.
Yeah. Earlier in the show, we're showing flurries in Toronto. Toronto, we don't want to see your flurries when to the north of us, everybody's getting pummeled.
Yes, it's a very different story, right? And that's how it is with the snow squalls, of course. They're so highly localized, so certain areas just get slammed with snow. It's certainly been a good thing towards our ski hills. They're getting some fresh snow on top of a really great base, but other areas it does make it really tricky on the roads for travel, certainly. So let's kind of show you the setup of what's going on. First of all, the big picture, that jet stream still allowing some milder air towards the west, but that colder air is fallen in across the Great Lakes, and there's more cold air to come. In fact, it will be reinforced and pushing more of that Arctic air in as we go through not just the weekend, but into next week. So we go into a pattern where our temperatures are actually going to be a little bit below normal as we look ahead, getting into this new year of 2025. Now, for the snow squall warnings, although they're highly localized, you see it's a wide area in a warning, the pink area, or even if you expand that to look at where there are watches. And that's just because as the winds shift a little bit, it will push where those squalls are occurring into a different area. And they may be thin in terms of the nature, but they're very long, so expansive in terms of how far they can stretch. And that's why, yeah, we get a few flurries into the city at times coming off of Georgian Bay and in the lee here of Lake Huron. But see those little lines, really, they're like streamers coming on through, and some of the areas that likely will be hardest hit are going to be around that kind of between Barrie and Midland, around Orillia, through that region. Locally, there could be some areas that pick up 40 to close to 60 centimeters. The winds are giving us wind chills, that's certainly true, but also driving these squalls. I've stopped it here because tomorrow afternoon and evening, you'll see Collingwood, Barrie, it becomes more, and even Toronto, more of a northwesterly flow. So it's westerly prior to that, then northwesterly. So that's going to shift where these are occurring as the day wears on tomorrow. Look at this. Snowfall potential for Barrie of 45 centimeters. Ooh. Collingwood close to 15. Negligible. North end of the GTA, a few centimeters to go. A little bit further north from there, it becomes more significant. But between Midland and Barrie there, that really shows you that's that area that could be quite hard hit. Tonight, a low near -3. It's going to feel closer to -10. -1 tomorrow. Still some flurries for the city. And then look at those overnight temperatures into next week. That's some of that colder air reinforced I'm talking about, Dwight.
Yeah, some of those double ditches when we're sleeping.
Yes, when we're sleeping. Most of us anyway.
That's it for us tonight. Thanks for watching. Have a great night, everybody.